Hi, good morning. It's Andrew Forster here. I'm the editor of Local Transport Today magazine. Thank you for joining us for this morning's session, which is an hour discussion about the England's Economic Heartland Regional Transport Strategy, which has just been approved. EEH covers an area spanning Swindon in the west, across to Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire in the east, also taking in Northamptonshire, Buckinghamshire, and Oxfordshire and Bedfordshire, which is obviously has unitary authorities. So I'm not going to say a great deal. We've got two politicians are going to kick us off with short presentations. They will then be joined by three industry representatives for a panel discussion with questions, initially a couple from me, but hopefully lots from yourselves who are watching. You'll see on the screen, you've got a ability to ask questions in the panel on the right-hand side. There's a questions little window which you can type in, and I would encourage you to do that as soon as you can. Really, if you've got questions that you want raised, please put them in there now or as you listen, and I'll be taking a read of them during the course of the hour, and we'll try and get in as many as we can. We're due to finish at midday. I think I've had a word with all the panelists. If it overruns 5-10 minutes, then they're happy, but we'll just see how things go. So first up, I'd like to welcome Mayor Dave Hodgson. Dave is the directly elected mayor of Bedford Borough Council and chair of the England's Economic Heartland Strategic Transport Forum. So over to you, Mayor Dave.
Thank you, Andrew, and pleased to be joined by Iain, Phil, Naomi and Mike on the panel, and look forward to the discussion that we're going to have this morning. I'm delighted that the transport strategy has been published and submitted to the Secretary of State for Transport. It's a huge milestone, fulfilling a core role of England's Economic Heartland as a subnational transport body and for our region. It's a culmination of a lot of hard work over the past 2.5 years. I'd like to thank all those who have contributed, but particularly the England's Economic Heartland staff for all the work they've done. The strategy sets out how the region's transport system can support economic growth while delivering a net zero transport system. It's been developed by the Strategic Transport Forum of elected politicians from across the region. It's been informed by our extensive evidence base of program of technical work, taken forward in collaboration with our partners within the Heartland and government. The strategy has been shaped by responses received through 2 rounds of public engagement that capture the views of our partners, stakeholders, residents and businesses, alongside the integrated sustainability appraisal, which was undertaken in parallel with the strategy's preparation. All this work has ensured the strategy truly reflects the priorities of the region. And make no mistake, these priorities are ambitious. That was consistent demand from both forum members and the consultation responses. The need to be ambitious to do things differently. That's why we've set ourselves the ambition of net zero emissions from transport by 2040, 10 years ahead of the legal requirement of 2050. There is no doubt this will be challenging. To succeed, we must grasp the unique opportunities that come from our region being a world leader in science and technology innovation. And we must have a fundamental shift in the way we plan and deliver connectivity in the future. In looking to shape the future, we must look to harness the opportunities that have come from changes in travel that have taken place in response to COVID-19. The greater use of flexible working, the greater use of e-commerce, and our ability to access services remotely. All of these trends have been accelerated in recent months. They show that change is possible. Business as usual won't achieve it. We need to innovate, to be bold in the decisions we take. Our future success cannot be taken for granted. Our region's headline economic success also masks the difficulties faced by our residents in areas of deprivation. Alongside helping to level up the UK, we must also help to level up opportunities across our region, so that everyone is given a chance to realise their potential. The strategy sets out how the region will harness the region's expertise in clean technologies to deliver a greener transport system, promote investment in digital infrastructure as a means of improving connectivity, use the delivery of strategic public transport schemes such as East West Rail, the Cambridge Autonomous Metro and the Milton Keynes Mass Rapid Transit as the catalyst for a shift towards lower carbon modes of travel, and champion increases in investment in active travel and shared transport to improve local connectivity to ensure that everyone can realise their potential, and also to continue to ensure the needs of the freight and logistics sector are met whilst lowering its environmental impact. Our focus must now be on turning words into actions. We need to give investors the confidence that the transport system will meet their future requirements. We need to give our communities confidence that the implications of our transport system of growth will be addressed. The strategy requires investment from government, from our partners, from the private sector. But as a region, we offer significant return on that investment. The Heartland is a net contributor to the economy. It is already leading the UK's green economic recovery and helping to boost the UK's position on the world stage. The region encompasses the entirety of the Oxford-Cambridge arc, a national economic priority. In an announcement last week, the government said the arc is key to the United Kingdom's national prosperity and that it can become one of the world's premier growth corridors and a world leader in sustainability. This strategy provides the framework for helping to achieve that ambition, and we are committed to working with government to make that happen. The need for change is compelling, and as a region, we are committed to delivering that change. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Dave. Second up, I'd like to invite Iain Stewart, and Iain is the MP, Conservative MP for Milton Keynes South. Over to you, Iain.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be able to join you this morning, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions and having a good and wide-ranging debate. Before I say my little contribution, can I just also extend my thanks to everyone at the Economic Heartland team for all their hard work in putting together the strategy. As Mayor Dave has just indicated, it's also a very timely report because in the last couple of weeks, the government has set out its next steps looking at the Oxford, Milton Keynes, Cambridge arc. And I appreciate the EEH territory is slightly wider than that going west towards Swindon, but I think it's entirely complementary because the arc obviously doesn't exist in splendid isolation, and each part of the arc does look in different economic directions, as well as the connectivity and shared interest in the arc itself. What was set out last week, or the week before rather, was the next steps towards developing a spatial strategy for the arc, together with a growth body to identify and develop the key economic ambitions. And I've I've had a long interest in this development, not just as a constituency member for an area in pretty much the heart of the Arc, but also a few years ago I was commissioned by the Secretary of State, Sajid Javid at the time, to do a report into the potential for the Arc. And when I did that work, which involved me speaking on a wide range of stakeholders, from the LEPs to local authorities, members of parliament on a cross-party basis, what became clear very early on is that the Arc shouldn't just be about housing and transport connections between them. Although there is clearly a need for additional housing and better transport connectivity, if we look just at it as a series of geographically adjacent developments, then we don't realise the full potential of the Arc. And one of the early, it was the SEMLEP, I suppose, was at a forum that they were discussing it. And one of the contributors said, and I think summed up neatly, what we need to establish is what's the picture in the jigsaw box that we're looking to create. And inside are all the bits that need to be assembled together to create that: the housing, the transport, the public services, digital connectivity, environmental and utility issues, because absolutely this has to be a sustainable development, and I very much welcome the contribution, the aspiration rather, to net zero ahead of the national targets. And that poses huge opportunities, but also challenges, because the area we're talking about doesn't fit neatly into any established government structures. It cuts across three of the traditional English regions: the South East, the East Midlands, and the East of England. I lost count of the number of local authorities and elected mayors that are all involved. And in all these, it's important to establish a proper balance of having structures that allow proper focus and pace of delivery, but not losing the local democratic accountability and support, because having public support for this is absolutely critical. So I think the steps that have been set out we haven't announced the spatial strategy, but the steps towards it, and it very much will be a collaborative approach. And I look forward to hearing how we can build the housing that people will welcome, and not feel that they're being forced to accept ugly identikit modern housing estates, but that the houses are designed sustainably, they look good, and they have proper connections. Obviously there'll be the key sort of transport connections with East West Rail and other schemes, but also the local connectivity. And here, we're in a world of evolving technology with autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, autonomous tramways, and the like. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And by doing that, we can unlock as Mayor Dave also mentioned, the enormous economic potential. If you look at the sectors that we have here, in life sciences and creative industries and high-end engineering, in AI and intelligent mobility, and many, many more, these sectors will increasingly fuse together. We need to look at the skills base. We need to look at if we're attracting inward investment from abroad, that we have the housing capacity, the connectivity, and also retain the beauty of the area that will continue to make this an attractive area. And I'll just conclude with one point why I think this is entirely achievable. I'm a government minister in the Scotland office at the moment, and one of the sectors I have in my portfolio is what's called the City Regional Growth Programme. And that involves lots of stakeholders, many local authorities, universities, private sector. working together to come up with the bids that they want to see investment on. And those relationships were a bit shaky at the start. There were suspicions that why is an investment going into one area and not mine? But those relationships have matured, and there's now a deep understanding that what was in one part of the area can be to the collective good. So I just point to that as an example of how these relationships can develop and work. And I very much look forward to playing my part in driving forward the ambitions that we have in this area. So I think that's my allocated time just about up, but I very much look forward to continuing the discussion in the panel session ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iain. That was terrific. Both presentations really giving a good political dimension for what we're going to talk about. We're moving on to a panel now, so I'd like to invite all the panelists to put on their cameras. So we have Mayor Dave, Iain Stewart. We also are joined, I'm pleased to say, by Phil Southall, who's Managing Director of the Oxford Bus Company and Chair of the EEH, that's England's Economic Heartland Bus Operators Association. We also have Mike Smith, who is Strategy and Planning Director for the South of Network Rail, although he tells me on Monday he is changing jobs and he's going to be in charge of the Restoring Your Railways Fund. So all the funding for that will obviously be going to the south of England. And finally, we got Naomi Green, and she is Head of Technical Programme at the England's Economic Heartland. So welcome to you all. We've got one or two questions coming in now, actually quite a few I'm looking. I'm just going to kick off a couple of questions, if I may, which really go back perhaps to just setting a bit of the context for this. And if I could ask maybe Mayor Dave initially, the England's Economic Heartland, I'm interested to know what do you see it as, in a sense, in terms of a body, right? Because clearly it's a subnational transport body, but it's not a statutory subnational transport body. And the government has said it's not going to create any new statutory bodies. So what's the status of this strategy? You've said you've sent it to the Secretary of State, but what weight does it actually have?
Thank you, Andrew. When we've had meetings with ministers in the Department of Transport, they want to work with regions. They want to have projects and a pipeline of projects that are more than just local projects for transport authorities. They want to have a structure across the regions. We talked about what we don't get if we're not a statutory body, and actually the engagement with the Department for Transport and their various satellite organisation, Network Rail and Highways England. It's important that we continue to talk to those to look at what is the regional importance, what are the cross-border, and we also talk to the other subnational transport boards. So we have regular meetings with them, and Naomi and Martin particularly have regular meetings. So we can look at those cross borders, because obviously we're bordered all around by other subnational transport boards and Transport for London. So it's about actually taking it and looking at a joined up approach across our region to lobby government. I don't think they want the word lobby, but it's actually putting ideas and pipelines forward to say this is how we can work, this is how we can best use our limited resources to improve the transport for our residents. How can we make transport better? How can we make it more environmentally efficient? And that's the conversations I believe they want to have, and that's the conversations we're having.
Okay. And maybe just you might want to come back on this, and Iain, you might want to come back on this as well. Iain, you referred to obviously the launch of the government's plans for a strategic, a spatial framework for the Oxford-Cambridge arc, and there's also talk in there of a growth body. Their geographies are similar to the EEH, but different. And what the government has said is that the spatial framework will essentially be a statutory piece of policy for local authorities to consider both in planning and transport. So it almost feels to me as if this transport strategy of the EEH may develop into, for the ARC area, into something much more powerful, a kind of statutory document, etc. Is that where we're heading? And is there a institutional change needed? There's talk of a growth body for the ARC. Does that complement the EEH or what?
I think it does, and if you look at the document that was published, and it's available, I can share the link for anyone who's interested. It's on the MHCLG page of the gov.uk website. What it doesn't do is sort of, right, here's a model that you get on with it. It's very much inviting ideas about how we evolve this, and I think the transport strategy is going to be an absolutely critical input into that. So I see this as a gradually evolving system. We don't, because of the geography of the area, it's not as easy. If you think of Greater Birmingham or Greater Manchester, where you've got that sort of established city region, you're trying to build together different blocks. And establish a sensible model that, as I say, both gives enough central direction to drive it forward, but doesn't lose the local knowledge, the local input, the local accountability. So I very much see the two, the EEH's ambitions and the ARC's ambitions as being entirely complementary. And I don't, I've never seen the ARC as, having buffers at Oxford at one end and Cambridge in the other. Those cities look westwards and eastwards respectively, and the work has to be, complementary to that, as well as looking at the territory in between.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. Thank you for both of those. Those kind of institutional questions, I think they're important to just understand where we're standing on these before we talk.
Andrew, can I just, one of the things about EEH is that it's a coalition winning. We chose to join up as well. We weren't told to join up. We actually sort of, the councils came together because we thought it was useful to work together, and it emerged from us deciding to work together on issues wider than just transport. But actually saying that we have a collective good that we can work together to actually do those cross-border things, and government has picked up on that and worked with us. So it's a coalition of the willing is where we started.
Okay, look, let's go on to sort of more kind of meaty discussions about policy and practice, etc. There's loads of questions coming in, and I'm having a look through them, and I can see one or two themes developing. So we're going to turn to them, and I'm going to turn to them with just a question from myself as a way of entering it. Decarbonisation, net zero, big part of the strategy. I didn't see how. Well, I see a target to reduce car trips by 5% a decade. Now, presumably this is at the same time as population in the area is growing significantly. I mean, I think the government used to talk for the ARC of 1 million new homes by X 2050, I think it was. Although I think I'm right in saying that's disappeared, but there's still going to be a lot more housing in the area. So what I didn't see in the strategy is actually how we're going to get this traffic reduction. It's nice to hear these aspirational targets, but actually, how is that going to be achieved? Is it through demand management or public transport or what? Who wants to have a kick off on that? Naomi, shall I turn to you first?
Thanks very much, Andrew. Absolutely. So I'd like to start with decarbonisation by saying there was a universal commitment at the Strategic Transport Forum from our local authorities across the region that they wanted us to be this ambitious. So the ambition of zero carbon by 2040 has come from politicians across the region, and there is a firm commitment to achieve that. And that is a really strong starting point. Alongside that, the approach that we've taken is embedded in evidence. So we commissioned a piece of work led by Oxford University with Southampton University to look at the pathways that we would need to take to achieve the decarbonisation ambitions that we've got. And from that, it is clear. The answer has to be framed in a reduction in traffic, and you're absolutely right, 5%. The 5% target that's in the transport strategy is based on the knowledge that we have now. Bearing in mind the Department for Transport, we're still awaiting the transport decarbonisation plan from DFT. So there's a number of national policies that we need to wait for before we can work out how they work within our region. So we set the 5% reduction on 2019 traffic levels, knowing that to get that with the level of growth we've got in the region is very, very difficult. However, we have an enormous opportunity in the fact that we've got a fantastic strategic public transport system now and planned through East West Rail, other major pieces of infrastructure such as Milton Keynes MRT, the Cambridge Autonomous Metro. Together, if you create a public transport system and you ensure that people have access to those in a first last mile solution, you're giving them the choice to make an alternative travel choice. That is a really key part of the solution. Alongside that is the digital agenda. And that's not just working from home, even though obviously COVID-19 has proven some very significant changes in travel behaviour. This is more about the way that the transport system operates and how we use digital to inform both vehicles and users' decision making as we move towards connected and autonomous vehicles, but also the way that people can use apps, etc., to inform their travel choices. All of those things together form part of a pathway towards decarbonisation, and in the transport strategy we commit to producing a roadmap over the next year that will build on what the Department for Transport publishes when it's published in the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, that will develop that even further.
Okay. Does anyone else? I was just thinking maybe, yeah, okay, Iain.
Well, just to add to that, as well as looking at those sort of perhaps longer journeys, there are a number of other sort of innovations happening, which I hope will reduce the sort of short-term, short-distance car usage. If you've been in Milton Keynes recently, you probably have come across one of our Starship delivery robots, which takes away if you run out of something for dinner and instead of driving to your local Tesco Metro, you can do it on the app and get the robot to deliver it to you. And that and other things like the pilots of electric scooters, I think will help reduce the number of short distance car journeys, and can complement some of the more strategic transport connections.
Okay, yeah, and I see Mayor Dave, you want to say something here?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe the first decade will be easier, but I think it links to our digital commitment there. There are a lot of the rural areas and some urban areas that don't have the connectivity to be able to work from home. So we actually get that digital connectivity for some of our rural areas that do more journeys because they have to, because they can't work from home. That 5%, that 5 days less journeys every 3 months is really achievable if we actually allow them to work at home. If we all drove to work 4 days a week rather than 5 days a week, that's a 20% reduction if we don't use our car at the weekend. So it is achievable, but the digital will enable more people to achieve that. And I think it's really important we use that in tandem with trying to actually do other methods of using, like the robots Iain was talking about.
Okay. Well, I know Phil. Yeah, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, just from a bus operator's perspective, the transport decarbonisation roadmap is absolutely essential. If we look at the DFT document, decarbonising transport, setting the challenge strategy, that was very clear. So public transport and active travel will be the natural first choice for our daily activities. We will use our cars less and be able to rely on a convenient, cost-effective and coherent public transport network. I think the work on the connectivity studies is revolutionary, where we're having a regular review of how we connect up our major hubs within the Heartland area. I think that's absolutely great. I think as well we ought to see England's Economic Heartland as a sort of island and bridges approach, where bus operators will continue to work with local transport authorities within their local area. England's Economic Heartland very much has a bridging role to deliver on some of the big challenges we've got, particularly on things like ticketing, where the technology to make multi-operator, multimodal ticketing needs to work. There might be some infrastructure that's required across the geography for that. And also, as we move to alternative fuels, the affordability of those fuels. So looking at hydrogen, for example, where there's a massive ambition in Oxfordshire to deliver on that. They're not as affordable as they could be at the moment. So again, when we look to deliver as we move towards zero emissions and the ambitions to achieve by net zero carbon by 2040, England's Economic Heartland will have a role in trying to bring that together. And BEIS, for example, at the moment is looking into how we might make hydrogen more affordable on this journey. So buses already account for 56% of all public transport journeys, but looking at taking a multimodal approach and the hierarchy that's in the strategy, trying to promote walking and cycling first, and then coming on to public transport, whether it be bus, rail or whatever, and then putting the car after that is extremely welcome as well if we're going to achieve the behavioural change that we need to.
Okay. Mike, you may not have something to say on this, but we are going to come to you because we've got questions about East-West Rail, etc. So don't worry yet. I was just going to say on that, all those speeches, all those answers were very interesting. I didn't hear anything about traffic demand management, kind of restraint, road pricing, etc. I personally wonder whether that's going to be necessary to achieve such a target. And I will just pick up on a question here from Chris Todd. Chris Todd, who is from the Transport Action Network. He asks, the ambition for net zero by 2041 is welcome, but how will it be achieved when there is considerable road building in the strategy, which will increase traffic and emissions? Who wants to have something to say about that?
I can start, and if you'd like me to, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Chris, for your question. We've worked continuously with you through the development of the strategy, and we're incredibly grateful for the contribution that you and other members of our influencers group have made to shaping it. There is no doubt that there is a dichotomy between road building and decarbonisation, but only if we don't change the way we look at roads. The road schemes that we've identified in the transport strategy are necessary not to enable growth in the future, but only to meet existing need. And we have to be realistic that there is a need for people for some journeys to be by road. However, by changing our perspective of roads and the way that we use the road space differently will enable us to operate in a way that will achieve our decarbonisation ambitions. Roads are not just for single car use journeys. They provide a vital service for freight and logistics, really significantly, but also for buses, mass rapid transit on road, and walking and cycling. Therefore, roads need to be part of our wider transport system. And by having this commitment to reduce private car journeys by a minimum of 5% per decade on 2019 levels, will give us that focus that enables us to work with the bus operators with Phil, and also to deliver our walking and cycling ambitions in a way that uses the road system in a very different way in the future. But it has to be in a whole systems approach, where when you use a road, you then connect potentially to a strategic public transport system, which will then take you wherever you need to go in the region or beyond. That's critical to the future of how we use our roads, allowing the people that need the roads for the journeys that they need to make to use them, and everyone else to have alternatives. If I may add one further comment, Andrew, what's fantastic about our region is that we've done a lot of work on persona mapping and looking at the different types of people that live in different parts of our region. And from that, we know that there are lots of people that have a high propensity to use alternative travel solutions, providing they have the facilities there to do that. That's why digital connectivity, public transport, and walking and cycling and local connectivity are all absolutely central to the solution, because the people, there is an appetite for it. We've just got to give it to people to use. Okay.
I just I know we're not going to get down into minutiae of different projects, but one particular road project that Alex Poppleton asks about: what's happening to the expressway from Hodgson to Milton Keynes? Mixed messages emerging recently. Who has something to say on that? The expressway.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, Iain.
To come in. Well, there's really not been any change. There's no the technical status of that bit of the expressway is that it's paused, and I've detected absolutely no ambition to sort of reinstate it as a strategic connection. Looking at that bit of the arc, it's very much looking at the East-West Rail. as being the central connection, and alongside that there may be some incremental upgrades to the existing routes, you know, the A421 and other roads, but I've seen nothing recently that suggests that, and I'm talking to senior ministers, there's absolutely no appetite to progress it.
Right. Okay.
Andrew, if I may just add to that, in addition to what Iain's just said, one of the projects, you know, we absolutely recognise the need for connectivity in that part of the region. And so one of the first connectivity studies that Phil was talking about earlier, that we're taking forward, commencing in March this year, is to look at broader connectivity in its broader sense between Oxford and Milton Keynes. That doesn't look at a specific mode, it looks at where people need to go, how they need to connect, and then what the solutions need to be. So that's a really critical piece of work that we're starting in the next couple of weeks.
Right. Okay. So keep an eye out for that. Okay. There's tons of questions here, so I'm going to move on from roads. I think, but at least temporarily. Let's talk about rail, because East-West Rail is obviously what lots of people's focus is on when they think about the EEH area. We had the £760 million announcement of the next phase of East-West Rail, which, I don't know, maybe, well, in our coverage was slightly kind of saying, well, it doesn't deliver quite as much as what was expected of it. It's taking us to Oxford, to Bicester, to Bletchley, not even guaranteed to Milton Keynes. It doesn't include Bedford to Bletchley, and it doesn't include the line down to Aylesbury. So quite a lot of money, and it doesn't quite deliver what was expected, perhaps. I guess that's just a preamble to say there's lots of questions about East-West Rail. Maybe I can turn to Mike. Where are we with East-West Rail getting to all the way to Cambridge?
Andrew, thanks for that. Can I just, before I answer that, I just want to link back to the last point, because I'd like to compliment Naomi and the team at EEH, because we link in with lots of subnational transport bodies, and they are without doubt one of the leaders in multimodal corridor thinking, and also in and you can tell that from the study that Naomi's just talked about, which is about to start, but also in thinking about first and last mile around key transport hubs, and particularly for us around railway stations, and linking in with colleagues like Phil's group and what have you, to make sure that local facilities and local journeys are meeting the needs of the groups that are in that area. And it's been really interesting and positive work that's happened in the last sort of 12 to 18 months. So I don't want to, before we go into East-West Rail matters, I don't want that to be lost, because I think we've done lots of good work, and our local team in both Eastern region and Northwest and Central are linking up with Naomi and the team on a day-to-day basis effectively in that stuff. So anybody on the call should be relatively assured that the rail team, the Network Rail team, the department team are linked in very closely with EEH on that matter. East-West Rail is a series of announcements, as you said, recently. In terms of the what was not included in that announcement, that is for further phases, and the department and the East-West Rail company and local stakeholders are still in a lot of consultation about many of those next steps. So I think it's not really right for me to comment on the detail of those, because there's a lot of consultation still going on. But the sense of direction, I think, is the most important thing, that the announcement that's been made firms up a really important, first stage, and then the next stage is definitely still under discussion, and without a shadow of doubt is still on the table.
Right. How close did we get to electrifying the railway, the next phase? Because it's not, electrification isn't included, and there's a couple of questions here about the failure to include electrification being a bit short-sighted, really, given the decarbonisation agenda.
I can understand anyone looking at that initial decision about electrification and saying that's entirely understandable. we've launched our rail decarbonisation strategy a few months ago, and I think it was mentioned in the National Infrastructure Strategy that was published before Christmas. The absolute precise details of which routes are prioritised as part of that programme is still happening. And at the moment, East West Rail, as you know, which hasn't got that prioritisation for electrification, but it does not mean the future phases and the current phase cannot be brought into that place. I think what has been said so far is just a realistic appraisal of what's available funding wise and making use of that. And yeah, I think we'll always run in making investment decisions. We'll always run the risk that someone could say that in the long term, a shorter term decision, governed by current budgets, could be short termism. I think the most important thing is that the policy is there, that there's a national drive to continue to decarbonise the railways as part of the transport system, and where the investment can be afforded when the decisions are made, then that will be brought into it.
Okay. Iain, what do you think about the lack of electrification?
Well, I'd make a number of points. I mean, my personal ambition is to see it electrified, and of course the bit that's currently under construction from and the further stages are being built with, I think the correct term is passive permission, to put in the overhead line equipment very easily at a later stage. The other consideration that is not been concluded yet is that, and I'm channeling my inner train geek here, is that they are looking at, as well, the alternative new technologies for train propulsion, hydrogen, battery. There's some very exciting, testing going on in that. So I don't think that debate is resolved. And I think Mike's right. The decision on electrification, I think, will be made in conjunction with other projects. So, if, for example, the Chiltern line is to be electrified, it would make then sense to do East West Rail as part of that. Just on the wider ambitions, I mean, the work that's already happening in the section in my constituency is amazing. If you've been through Bletchley recently, they're sort of dismantling the old flyover and putting the new one in place, and the sort of civil engineering work to prepare for the track is continuing apace. Part of the sort of process is that because of COVID, the government stepped back from doing a sort of whole Parliament spending programme and did a 1 year. So what's been announced, the 750 million approximately, is that it falls in that 1 year. And the further decisions will come later this year when the sort of longer term spending envelope is determined. But that's not inhibiting the sort of, as Mike said, the consultation work that's going on. If it's not already started, very soon there'll be the formal consultations along the Marston Vale line, looking at what changes are going to be required there to upgrade the line. And then the further work is to going east of Bedford, what the particular route's going to be. So there's absolutely no diminution of the ambition to have the full project in place. Okay, and Mayor Dave, you indicated you want to say something on this.
Yeah, thanks very much, and welcome Iain's comments there. I mean, I think that many of us saw the lack of announcement. Welcome the announcement of the money, but the lack of announcement of electrification is disappointing. But I understand what Iain's point, and I think that his comments there are useful. And I think we'll all look to lobby to have a more carbon neutral railway, whether that be electric or some other mode of transport. And I think that's the key thing that we want to look at. But the east-west connectivity is key to the regional structure. We know that north-south connectivity is pretty good. There are some exceptions to that within the region. But the ability to connect the East Coast, the Midland Main Line and West Coast Main Line, so that people don't have to travel into London and out again, is a really important thing for the region. It's a really important thing for the country, and we mustn't lose sight of that big prize to have the connectivity across the region and mean that we don't have to travel in and out of London. And there's plenty of examples of that, how long it takes and how much petrol takes. And what it tends to mean is If people have got to travel a short distance, east or west, they decide, I'm not going to go into London out again, I'm going to jump in my car. And what we're trying to do is remove that. And that's the important aspect of this, reducing car journeys.
Okay. We've got two other questions on East West Rail that are related to the kind of nature of what we're actually going to be delivering. Brian Ringer, a rail freight consultant, and also Julian Worth, who's I think I'm right in saying ex-rail and rail freight industry operator, both ask about the freight capability of what we're delivering, particularly given all the new housing we're talking about building and therefore bringing in construction and aggregates, and also given its potentially attractive route for presumably container traffic, either heading down to Southampton from the Midlands or east-west from Felixstowe to the Midlands. My understanding is freight capability on East West Rail is quite limited, and is this not a missed opportunity? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I'll go back to Iain's really valid points in that there's for the first section that's being constructed, there is passive provision for additional enhancement of the functionality. I think that's the first thing. The freight for the sections that are now going to go into consultation for the next phase of construction, that is a discussion that needs to be, that will be part of that, and it will be linked to a national freight strategy. So the flows that you're talking about, the container flows, if you like, from Southampton up to the West Midlands and beyond, and the flows from Felixstowe across the region, if you like, and then going distributed across the country, they will form part of the discussion around what we, dare I say it, what we use East West Rail in its full form for, and there'll be a balance between whether it's the right route to send a lot of freight through, but also that will then be a choice and a trade-off with capacity for passenger use as well. So I think there's some very, very interesting, very challenging, but sort of very exciting decisions to be made. And like going right back to what Iain said, what's more important now is the initial phase with a series of passive provisions is already underway. Okay, yeah. I guess it's the difference between the East-West Rail line as presented and what the strategy, EEH strategy, talks about being potentially an East-West main line. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. It is an East-West main line. I mean, it's a fantastic piece of investment. That in some ways the challenge for the likes of EEH, I think, and the rest of us as infrastructure providers and developers of the long-term strategies is those choices. It's those choices of use of that main line. But that main line, that discussion is the sort of discussion that goes on constantly on the existing main lines as well. So it's nothing new, and it's absolutely critical, and it's really important that all the funders and those responsible for transport across that corridor are part of that discussion.
Okay.
Andrew,
yeah, sure.
If I could just come on that, I think there's a broader conversation about freight on rail, which is a policy that is in the transport strategy. We're committed to supporting freight on rail, and the way that East West Rail is designed will, has that ability to accommodate freight, as Mike was saying. But alongside that, there are a number of other key freight routes through the region. Felixstowe to Nuneaton is a very, very significant freight route, and it's very important that we ensure that we have the right investment in place for those key routes, as well as thinking about delivery of East West Rail. So I think looking at it just from the narrowness of East West Rail is important, but we absolutely have to remember that investing in other freight routes that are already known as opportunities for rail freight is absolutely critical. And the other thing I'd just say is that Network Rail are doing some fantastic work with Highways England on looking at Solent to the Midlands as a freight path, and what needs to be done on the rail line between Southampton and the Midlands, which obviously goes all the way through Oxfordshire, to make sure that we can maximise the potential of freight on rail in that corridor.
Okay. I'm going to move on to kind of more kind of urban transport issues. And I'll just, as a link, I'll just point out to anyone who hasn't actually looked at the EEH strategy. There's some interesting stuff in there about potentially new rail corridor, new east-west rail corridors, as well as east-west rail project. I think it stems from work by Network Rail with the EEH, and it identifies two: North Oxfordshire through Northampton to Peterborough, and also Buckinghamshire across to Hertfordshire, linking up with, I think, the West Anglia Main Line in Hertfordshire. So worth having a read of that if you're interested in kind of rail and strategic rail developments. The urban transport, and I think this is perhaps a question for Phil. Phil, you know, there's talk of major urban mass transit schemes really going across the EEH area. We've got Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro. We've got I think it's an A414 corridor kind of thing in Hertfordshire. We've got mass rapid transit in Milton Keynes. I'm not quite sure what's planned for Oxfordshire, but there's certainly some plans. And do you want to just say a little bit about it all? And I mean, is it all just independently being developed, or is there any kind of thinking about harmonizing technologies or approaches, even linking up these schemes? I mean, if they're intra-regional, could they eventually link up with one another?
Well, I think we've also got, I mean, it's a very, very good point, Andrew. We've also got the successful busway schemes in Cambridge and the Luton to Dunstable busway already. So what that's shown is where you can deliver, you know, an efficient system that's attractive to people. It can get them from A to B as quickly as possible and as efficiently. People will use it. Both of those tremendously successful. What we're trying to do, I think, Andrew, is create that door-to-door experience where, and as I said earlier about what the government's saying about it becoming the obvious choice to use, and I think the corridor studies, as we say, looking at how the regional hubs get joined up is going to be critical. So whilst these schemes may be relatively local, I guess I use the analogy I used earlier about islands and bridges, is yes, you may develop these schemes on islands, but for people that travel across the corridor, it's going to need to be joined up in some way, shape or form. And I say ticketing is one of those. And that's where, you know, whilst you might have very successful local ticketing schemes, how we join that up, you know, with all the new technology we've got, contactless, QR codes and all of that is absolutely something we need to explore to make it seamless for the customer. I think all of that is not really about the technology anymore. It's about the commercial arrangements and how to potentially get that funded and get something off the ground and sustainable. So that's a key role that we've got. I mean, in terms of technologies, I think really it's about how, and this is where, again, the Heartland can have a strong role in this. We are fortunate at the moment to be on a short list of two, the first electric bus city in Oxford at the moment. So this is something that I'm very closely involved in my day job. And it's quite clear we've got a challenge there where the cost of ownership and cost of running a zero emission bus is much higher than even an ultra low emission diesel bus. And this is where we all need to work together to make that affordable and deliverable. Yes, you'll get some savings from operational costs. Yes, you'll get some maintenance costs. But the big thing is policy on things like the bus service operators grant, where currently operators get paid for the mileage that they run. That might need to be repurposed to make it zero emission buses more affordable. And in Scotland, for example, they've just put a 20 kilometre incentive in, and straight away there's almost 235 zero emission buses gone in. So if we've got the right positive mental attitude, we're willing to work together on innovative solutions, I think, you know, to create that end-to-end door-to-door journey experience, we've got a lot to go for in the Heartland. We've got very enthusiastic operators, bus operators, rail operators. We've got very enthusiastic local authorities, and I think if we can put our collective knowledge together, the prize is there to be had. We know decarbonisation is challenging, but we just need to be innovative in our thinking to make sure that we use the tools that are available to us to deliver that really innovative door-to-door experience for the youth and put them at the centre of everything we're doing.
Okay. And does the, you know, does your operators association, does it have a, I mean, is it really just I'm trying to figure out whether it's doing a lot of kind of joint work across the Heartland, or is it really just representing the operators in the Heartland? There's a slight difference.
Well, we're doing the latter, to be honest, at the moment, Andrew, but that doesn't mean we won't, you know, as we try and move towards delivery of this strategy, because as we all know, it's great having a strategy, we must move into delivery. And I know, you know, again, congratulate the team on that. I know they're passionate that we do need to move to delivery and that we do need to move to delivering things on the ground. So we've always said that whilst the association was the beginning of the journey to start a conversation, as we come into the projects, of course, we will collaborate and work with the officers in the Heartland and the politicians to make sure we deliver things that mean things to people, because we know that where we can do that, we can achieve modal shift, and we do need to take this multimodal approach. And I think what we might find also is that the assessment tools that people like the Department for Transport use might need to be adjusted as well to take account of the multimodal approach that England's Economic Heartland is endorsing through the corridor studies approach. Because at the moment, it does tend to favour the car over public transport modes because of the journey time penalty, and therefore we are going to work together to make sure that we promote, you know, the hierarchy that's in the strategy to make sure that active travel and public transport has a stronger say in the assessment of schemes, because it's absolutely vital if we're going to deliver on decarbonisation.
Okay, we've heard a lot in this hour about kind of aspirations for new investment, whether it's public transport, roads, or you know, rail across the area. Does the Heartland? What do panelists think about whether the Heartland does it need a dedicated budget?
Never turn down a budget, Andrew. Never turn down a budget.
Never turn down one. But
If Iain wants to open his checkbook up and persuade people, we're happy to take money. It would just mean we could do so much more, and we do already get some money for Department for Transport, and we're grateful. We just received a similar amount, or the same amount of last year, to support the work we're doing. So we're grateful for that. But obviously, we think that, and I think all bits of the public sector will say they can spend money wisely and more money. So yes, we would happy to discuss with the Department of Transport or DCMS, if we're talking about digital, how we can invest more in the region. And we think we can do it to get a really good return, not only for the economy, but also for our transport system. So yes, if you're offering it, Andrew, we'd happily have some more money.
We can report you wanting it. We can't offer it, I'm afraid.
Andrew, if I may just come in on that, I think Mayor Dave's absolutely correct and spot on. One of the enormous challenges for us is the modally specific approach to funding from the Department for Transport. So when you're trying to deliver a place-based solution, which is so critical to the ambitions of the ARC spatial framework, but also decarbonisation, you have to look at an outcomes-based approach, not starting with where's the money, how can we spend it, but actually, where's the need? How can we reduce carbon? How can we still connect people up? How can we still support growth? And therefore, what do we need? And you know, we have such fantastic ambition from our politicians to do this. We just need the flexibility of funding to allow them to achieve it. Just as Phil was mentioning about the appraisal process as well, it just needs to be more flexible. And the other thing we need is confidence. So we know that, as Mayor Dave said, the region is a net contributor to the exchequer. If you put money here, it brings benefits. It brings economic benefits to the country as a whole. However, we need to be able to do that with certainty, because just as the public sector will invest and reap benefits, so will the private sector. But the private sector will only invest if they've got certainty and clarity of what we're trying to achieve. And that is so significant to achieving the opportunities in our region.
Iain.
Just very briefly, because I'm conscious of time. You know, well, firstly, I don't work in the Treasury, so I don't have a government checkbook to write anything. But it's, you know, don't look at transport in isolation when you're looking at funding. I'll just give you one live example of that. In Bletchley, in my constituency, we are one of the Towns Fund projects where we're bidding into the MHCLG pot to get some investment that will go round the station development in Bletchley to make sure that we've got the connectivity to the station and help regeneration in that area. So that's a separate, that's not transport funding in itself, but is an investment into the town of Bletchley that will complement the East West Rail investment. So it's important to look across the piece at the funding opportunities.
Okay. We are coming to, well, we've just gone to midday. There's, I'm going to just, one quick theme which I've not picked up on yet, and we'll just have a quick discussion on that before bringing it to a close. I think there's a number of questions coming forward really about, well, concerns about what the EEH area is going to look like, perhaps would be this best way of summing it up, by 2050. With the amount of new home and economic development being built, and I think maybe there are some people who feel this is quite a controversial agenda, which is going to change the whole nature of the area. And I just wondered whether anyone would like to say anything about what the EEH area is going to look like in 20, 30 years. Is it going to be one big conurbation with a few green fields between towns, or what? Dave?
No, it's not going to be. And I think what we're going to look for, and what we have to look for, is supporting existing residents, the residents that have that economic impact on the country. And what the transport strategy does is look at supporting them. We've already been in growth areas, so across the ARC we have substantial growth each year. I think within the ARC it was something around about 20,000 last year from memory. So we have that growth, and what we need to do is make sure that growth is sustainable, and make sure that the existing residents and new residents have a better quality of life and more choices when they move into their new homes. So no, it can't be retrofitted. People will make mode shift when they move houses. We know that, and we need to actually make sure we build on that. But the area is extensively rural. There are lots of villages in my patch that are 10 miles away from the nearest town and under 100 houses, and they will remain rural and have that lifestyle. And we need to make sure their connectivity to their service centres are better, whether that be digital or some other form of transport. Right.
Does anyone else want to say anything on that? Iain?
Just to echo that, and I will not be supporting any proposal that is just about massive urban sprawl. We've got the opportunity to design new communities that are beautifully built, sustainable, well connected, have open space around them. And that's our challenge, to make sure that growth is there. And if you read through the MHCLG document that came out, that's very much at the heart of it. So I want a collaborative approach to deliver that, and not just have endless new housing estates bolted on the perimeters of existing settlements that will eventually join up. That's not what I want, and I'll be working as hard as I can to ensure it doesn't happen.
Okay.
Andrew, if I may just follow Iain up on that. The way that the transport strategy is written is about actually connecting people and places, and I think that's the principle for this region. As Mayor Dave said, 34% of residents in this region live in rural towns or their hinterlands. That is, the national average is 23%. So we've already got a very high proportion of rural communities. That's not going to change. It's not that kind of environment. And I think the transport strategy is looking at as enabling connectivity across the region, so that people who work in perhaps some of the urban areas have better connectivity and therefore more choices on where they live, perhaps somewhere more affordable, or indeed someone who lives in an area can then access the massive growth opportunities of jobs in other parts of the region. It's about connecting people with places and their opportunities. And the other thing to say is one of the great opportunities of this region is the commitment of the ARC and England's Economic Heartland to biodiversity and environmental net gain. It's a huge focus. It's written into the transport strategy, but also alongside that, we're working really close with the ARC Environment Group and making sure that everything we do aligns with that big government agenda around the 25-year environment plan. It's a huge opportunity, and if we do it well, we could really create quite a special place.
Great. Okay, well, look, that's me. I'm gonna close the Q&A. I'd just like to thank everyone who's been watching. Actually, the number of questions is phenomenal, which has come in. We haven't been able to ask them all, I'm afraid. So I'm sorry for that. But hopefully we've got most of the themes covered in the hour. And I think, Naomi, do you have a few words to kind of sum up before I say the final words? How it's working?
Thank you very much. And I'm mindful of time, so I will significantly shorten my messaging. But I just wanted to say this has been a really fascinating debate, and I'm incredibly grateful to all the panelists for joining, not just this session, but also for working with us and giving so much commitment to EEH as we've been developing the transport strategy and as we move forward to its delivery. For us, the legal requirement for net zero by 2050 and the forum's ambition for us to deliver this by 2040 makes the imperative and opportunity for change greater now more than ever before. The priorities of the transport strategy, the way it is drafted, is designed to enable us to achieve that. And I would say the transport strategy is built on an evidence base and data that informs us at every step along the way, meaning that the strategy we've produced is a credible plan of action. But we do need to deliver the right policy and the right investment framework to get there. So what next for us? Well, first and foremost, we need to get on with delivering those schemes that we know are needed. We've talked about some of them today. East-West Rail, not just to Cambridge, but through to Ipswich and Norwich. And as I think Iain Stewart mentioned earlier, we need the link from between Aylesbury and Milton Keynes. All of those elements are absolutely critical to achieving the growth ambitions of the region. We also know about some key highway schemes, the A34, the A1, that have very significant pressures. And we talked earlier about the mass transit systems, the Cambridge Autonomous Metro, Milton Keynes Rapid Transit, and the A414. There is an awful lot in the transport strategy and the investment pipeline that we just need to get on with. And the forthcoming spending review, as Iain mentioned, expected in the autumn of this year, provides the right opportunity for government to commit to funding these priorities. And through the mechanisms and others, we will, on behalf of this region, ensure that the transport strategy's priorities are well represented to the Treasury and the Department for Transport. But we do also need to change, as Phil was saying, the way we develop solutions, including the way we appraise merits of individual proposals and the way we quantify and weight the benefits of them. To do this, we need shared endeavour, not just within the region, but with government. And centred to all of this is delivery. We, EEH, have a key role in accelerating delivery and ensuring that our infrastructure provider partners, Network Rail, Highways England, as well as those local authority partners responsible for delivering major investment infrastructure priorities at the moment, are all delivering at pace. And where barriers to delivery are identified, we, EEH, will build on our collaboration and partnership approach to unlock those barriers. And this is particularly the case of schemes which cross local authority boundaries. We're committed to the important role that we can play in accelerating infrastructure delivery. And as we publish the transport strategy this week, we believe that we have the framework and focus in place to ensure, with you as our partners, that we really make this happen. So thank you very much for joining, and we very much look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you very much, Naomi, and thank you to all the panelists for today's session. I'm sure there's a virtual round of applause going on all around the country at the moment from the viewers. We've had over 200 people watching and listening. So thank you to those of you who have done so. Thanks to all the questions for answering. I think it's been a great hour, actually, or slightly longer than an hour. Just a couple of points from me. I think there's in terms of where we are at this stage, we've got the EEH transport strategy published. There's now the development of the ARC spatial framework, so it's an ongoing process to kind of develop the investments. We've got a number of corridor studies that the EEH is going to be leading on, overseeing, which are going to identify more kind of investment priorities. So there's lots of process work going on. We've heard about the decarbonisation agenda. I think there's some people think there's bits of tension there between that and the road building. I think personally there's a question mark about how you achieve that reduction without demand management, which you didn't hear about demand management today. I can't see how you deliver that without it. although I take the point that lifestyles are changing. We've heard a lot about East West Rail being a real core investment, and I think one of the questions was, which we didn't get time to ask, was a chap asking about how his journey from, I think it was Harwell to somewhere near Cambridge would be different in 2050, and I think maybe the answer might be a fast train between almost between the two. So East West Rail, terrifically exciting project, and to see it being realised. We've also touched on whether the EEH area, what it's going to look like in 20, 30 years, and I know there's concerns from various pressure groups. I live in Oxfordshire, and I know there's concerns at this end about the huge house building, and that we're maybe changing the nature of these historic shire counties, but you know, others are adamant that that won't be the case, and we'll still have a nice countryside in between the towns. And I think finally, maybe the question, which you know is obviously behind any big agendas like this, is one of expenditure and budgets. And we're all here hearing what we want to do, but there's obviously Treasury and all sorts of questions flowing from that about what can be done when it's set in the context of a national expenditure plan. So I think that's all I want to say, and other than to say thank you all for taking part. It's been a really good session.